I was born in Seminole, Oklahoma, and grew up in a small frame house on the banks of Big Wewoka Creek near a tiny little town called Earlsboro, Oklahoma. It was a rural setting. We lived just above a big watershed lake that was put on the creek back in the WPA days. If you look carefully, you might find it on a map. Well, our place was pretty small. We had 5 acres on the corner, and it overlooked the lake, and there was a cow pasture between us and the lake that belonged to a local farmer. We'll keep his name quiet. At any rate, life progressed wonderfully for me there. I enjoyed hunting and fishing as a child, and particularly when I got up to the age of about 12 or 13, my dad, on my birthday, presented me with a .22 caliber pistol. Well, I took it as a license to go everywhere, and I did. I packed that thing, and boy, I felt safe no matter where I went. You would have thought it was a cannon instead of a little tiny pea shooter. Well, my dad noticed this, and the farmers and other folks in the area had mentioned to him that they'd seen me in all kinds of odd places, day and night. And we were visiting my grandfather on my mother's side, and he and my grandfather took me aside and wanted to have a private talk with me, which understandably frightened me badly. When your dad and your grandpa want to have a quiet talk with you, you figure you're in trouble. And honestly, my grandfather, you could put everything he ever said to me on one 3x5 card and have plenty of room left over. Well, my dad did all the talking, as usual. And he said, "Now, I want to be serious with you for a minute. You've been going all over the country out in these woods, and I want to talk to you a minute. Make sure you're being safe." I said, "Okay, sure." And he sat me down and he said, "Now, have you seen anything strange out in the woods?" I said, "What do you mean by strange?" "I've seen some garbage. I've seen leftover places where the oil field's been, stuff like that." "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, have you seen anything like little stick houses or crude little teepees made up out of logs?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've seen those." He said, "Well, what do you think about them?" I said, "Well, I thought they were left by the Indians back in the old days." And he started laughing, and my grandfather started laughing. I said, "What's so funny?" He looked at me and he cocked his head like he usually would, and he said, "Son, how long does a stick or a log survive in this environment out in the woods?" I gave it some thought. I said, "Well, in optimal conditions, I would guess maybe 10 or 20 years. He said, "How long's it been since there were wild Indians around here?" "Whoa, wow, about 150 years, so that doesn't add quite up." I said, "Okay, you've got my attention. So what's leaving these things behind?" He said, "Well, they're called boogers." Now, that was a colloquial term that evidently came out of Appalachia. But he referred to them as that. Most folks around now call them Sasquatch or Bigfoot. They appear to be a large hominid between, well, depending on how old they are. If they're full-grown male, we're looking at 9, 10 feet. Either russet-colored or silver or white or dark brown or black. Now, he said, they live around here, and you need to be careful. If you ever see one, it'll probably be the last thing you see. I said, "Oh, that's reassuring." And my grandfather's nodding along. He said, "And especially," he said, "when you're out at night and you're down by the creek or the river, don't shoot at any logs you see floating down the river. They're not all logs." I said, "Okay, what are they?" He said, "Well, now, there are these things. They float down the rivers at night to get places." I thought, oh, well, that's weird. Never seen that. And I said, so how do you know this, Dad? He said, well, we used to have a fishing camp for many years down on the Blue River near Ada. I said, yeah, you've told me stories about it. And he said, well, did you ever wonder why we never go fishing there? He said, one night I made a mistake. I shot something in the river and it got up and damn near killed all of us. He said, we lost all our equipment and barely got out of there with our lives. Well, okay. Good advice then. I tucked it away in my mind and I really didn't think anything about it. I thought, okay, I've seen those, Bigfoot movies down at the theater because it was the 70s and, there were a bunch of crazy Bigfoot movies came out about that point that really tried to make it all very sensational. I just tucked it away. Well, time passed and I was about 14 and I was standing on the front cement porch of our house looking at the lake just at sundown, and it was just beautiful there. The lake had a little ridge that ran behind it. I guess Big Woka Creek had been pretty deep many, many years ago. And it just made for a lovely sunset to watch. And I was standing there and watching the sunset. All of a sudden I noticed that up on the ridge there was somebody running. And I thought, now how am I even seeing somebody run from that far away on the other side of the lake, up on the ridge? I thought, okay, that's weird. And I cocked my head and I was watching it. And I got to thinking, okay, those are oak trees up there. I know those oak trees. I know the farmer who takes care of the cows there. He keeps them trimmed at 11 feet. Well, this fella had to stoop down to get under them to run underneath them. And my mother came up behind me about this point and she said, what are you looking at, son? I said, I'm looking at a giant run along the ridge line. And she made a noise that I really couldn't repeat because it was weird, and grabbed me by the belt in the back and physically drugged me in the house and locked all the doors. And refused to talk about it any further or let me back out of the house until the next day. Well, I, of course, went and talked to my father about it, and he seemed extremely nervous about the whole notion. And he said, okay, fair enough. He said, no more wandering around the woods around here alone. You're done. And I, of course, ignored this. Well, I never did have any particular encounters other than that right there. I felt, uncomfortable in some areas that I avoided. I think that's a good reason to avoid them if you feel uncomfortable. I did have one of the farmers tell me that there was a section of his place that was just off to the south of us where strange things happened. And he lost cows in strange ways, that the babies would be pulled out of the mothers and then the legs of the babies would be twisted off and the rest of the carcass just left there. And he just didn't feel comfortable in that section of his property. He owned a few hundred acres, and he just decided he didn't need that chunk of it and he'd just avoid it. Well, that's about all I know about what happened there. And I have some other stories, but we'll get to those later.